I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that me and Wid's been sitting here waiting for that coach to pull in.
Pernell Roberts walked away from Bonanza at the height of its success, turning down a staggering $10,500 per episode, a fortune in 1965, without hesitation. While his co-stars became millionaires, Roberts quietly vanished from Hollywood. Behind the scenes, he'd been battling with producers for years, calling the show childish and criticizing how his character never evolved. Yet money wasn't the real reason he left. The truth, only recently uncovered, involved civil rights, blacklisting, and a secret Hollywood wanted buried forever. Born on May 18, 1928, in Waycross, Georgia, Roberts came into the world during the Great Depression. His childhood was marked by grinding poverty. By the age of 5, over 60% of local farms had been foreclosed. His father, once dreaming of becoming a doctor, ended up selling Dr. Pepper door-to-door for $7.85 a week, about $143 today. Their wooden house had no plumbing, and young Pernell had to walk over a mile every day to fetch water. From 1932 to 1934, the family relied on food assistance as unemployment in town hit 42%. One event changed Roberts forever. On July 11, 1939, at just 11 years old, he saw 78 Ku Klux Klan members march through his town. That terrifying moment planted the seeds of his lifelong passion for civil rights. His mother worked 3 jobs, sometimes until 2 a.m., and young Pernell would wait outside the factory to walk her home safely. This hardship forged his unyielding character and grit. Music became his refuge. At 13, he found a broken tuba in a junkyard and taught himself to play it within 3 months, along with the French horn, sousaphone, and 5 types of drums. By 15, he could play 11 instruments and performed for soldiers at the local USO, accurately replicating complex music after a single listen. In 1944, an accident crushed his hand, and doctors gave him a mere 7% chance of regaining full use. Defiant, he practiced 14 hours a day, and by March 1945, he was playing Chopin's toughest piano piece with full control. He wasn't just a musician, he was a composer. His yearbook listed 14 original compositions, one of which, Southern Lament, was performed by the Atlanta Symphony in 1946. Offered a full scholarship to Juilliard, he turned it down, calling the school's training too restrictive. Too young to enlist, Roberts still contributed to the war effort. Just 2 days after Pearl Harbor, he organized a musical revue that raised $837, equivalent to about $15,400 today, for war bonds. Between 1942 and 1945, he performed in 247 USO shows, often cycling up to 30 miles to reach military bases. In August 1944, at just 16, he was secretly hired by the War Department to perform for wounded soldiers and German POWs at Camp Gordon. Military psychologists later reported that his performances helped improve the recovery rates of seriously injured servicemen. On March 11, 1945, during a rocket alert drill, he refused to leave the stage, playing his tuba for the full 37 minutes. That act of bravery earned him a commendation signed by General Eisenhower. Even while burning with scarlet fever on Christmas Eve 1945, he performed for 178 soldiers, 16 of whom would later die in the Battle of the Bulge. Roberts discovered acting in church. At just 8 years old, he stunned his congregation during a Christmas pageant by adding a 4-minute monologue questioning God's silence during Herod's massacre. By 12, he'd performed in over 20 church plays. In 1943, he organized the town's first integrated performance, inviting 7 black teens to act with him. The backlash was intense. Dozens left the church, and his father's job was threatened. But Roberts didn't back down. In 1944, he portrayed Judas as a misunderstood revolutionary rather than a villain, provoking outrage from church elders. His final church role, in The Prodigal Son, rewrote the biblical tale to criticize inequality, a performance that caught the eye of a theater director, who gave him his first professional opportunity 6 weeks later. Roberts enrolled at Georgia Tech in 1946 but quickly clashed with the administration, organizing debates on nuclear weapons and boycotting ROTC classes. He published a bold critique accusing the engineering department of ignoring ethics. By April, he was under FBI surveillance for leading student groups studying Marx and Einstein. One dean described him as gifted but dangerous. After just 141 days, he left, later saying he wasn't interested in building bridges, he wanted to know who controlled them. That summer, he joined the U.S. Marine Corps. Thanks to his musical skills, he didn't see combat but played in the Marine Corps Band, performing at more than 200 official events during the Truman presidency. At one event, he stood just 7 feet from Winston Churchill. He nearly faced a court-martial for playing jazz during a military review, but a commander who admired his flair spared him. After leaving the Marines in 1948, he returned to Georgia Tech, excelling in calculus but again quitting after a fiery debate over engineers' societal responsibilities. In 1950, he enrolled at the University of Maryland as a philosophy student, acing his humanities classes while intentionally failing science ones. Roberts's transition to Hollywood began in earnest in 1958 when he landed a role in Desire Under the Elms, acting opposite Sophia Loren and Anthony Perkins. Based on Eugene O'Neill's 1924 play and directed by Delbert Mann, the film had all the elements of prestige cinema. Roberts portrayed Peter Cabot in the emotionally intense drama, which was released by Paramount Pictures. Though the film featured a high-profile cast, it received mixed reviews. Critics particularly panned Burl Ives's performance as Ephraim Cabot. Nevertheless, the film earned an Oscar nomination for Best Black and White Cinematography and recognition at the 1959 Laurel Awards. This 111-minute feature marked Roberts's entrance into serious filmmaking and set the stage for his unique career. That same year, he appeared in The Sheepman alongside Glenn Ford, a Western film that would ironically foreshadow his career's direction. Though a classically trained actor who had performed Shakespeare on Broadway and won the prestigious Drama Desk Award for his off-Broadway role as Macbeth, Roberts was now stepping into a genre that would both elevate his profile and frustrate his artistic ambitions. In 1955, Pernell Roberts brought a distinctive gravitas to his Western roles. His background in formal theater set him apart from many of his contemporaries, infusing his performances with a level of nuanced characterization rarely seen in the genre. By 1958, Roberts was actively balancing film sets with theatrical productions, having recently completed Broadway runs in The Taming of the Shrew and The Duchess of Malfi in 1957 before transitioning more fully into Hollywood projects. Ironically, while Roberts would become typecast in westerns, critics would later point out that some of his finest work came within that very genre. His time on the set of The Sheepman introduced him to the demanding realities of Hollywood westerns: long shoots in remote locations, physically grueling scenes, and dialogue that felt overly simplified compared to his Shakespearean roots. Yet these experiences laid the groundwork for professional patterns and industry connections that would lead to a breakthrough television opportunity the following year. Roberts's collaboration with Randolph Scott in the 1959 Western Ride Lonesome is considered by many critics to be the pinnacle of his cinematic career. In this 73-minute film, shot in CinemaScope at Lone Pine and directed by Bud Boetticher, Roberts portrayed the morally complex outlaw Sam Boone. The film, part of Boetticher's acclaimed Ranone cycle of westerns, also marked the screen debut of James Coburn, helping to cement a legendary ensemble cast. Roberts's performance was celebrated for its depth and charisma. One reviewer noted that he brought sardonic humor, masculine charm, and fidelity to his own peculiar code to the role. Interestingly, in Burt Kennedy's original screenplay, Roberts's character was supposed to die, but Boetticher was so captivated by his performance that he asked Columbia Pictures executive Sam Briskin to allow the character to survive. Though he promised to shoot 2 endings, the director only filmed the one in which Boone lived. This film was a turning point, where Roberts's stage-honed abilities meshed perfectly with the Western genre, proving he could deliver complexity even within conventional roles. In 1959, Roberts signed on to play Adam Cartwright in Bonanza, a major television opportunity with NBC placing high hopes on the show. Unlike a rookie, Roberts already had a solid theater resume, having performed in plays like Oedipus and Antigone. Yet by 1962, just 3 years into the show, he was frustrated. He complained publicly, saying, "I had to sign for a 6th year to get a raise. But now I would prefer to be out entirely." NBC had extended his original 5-year contract to 6, hoping to maintain their top-rated show. When he asked to leave, they refused. One executive admitted the network was trying to package the show neatly for a new sponsor. Roberts portrayed Adam as a thoughtful, college-educated architect, a calm intellectual contrast to his more emotional brothers. But what began as a complex role quickly turned stale. The writers wouldn't allow the character to grow. Even as an adult, Adam constantly sought his father's permission. Roberts said, "I thought it would be a sophisticated show, but what we got felt empty." By 1963, he was already warning that things were not going well. "What we discussed never happened." And by 1965, he had reached his limit. "I fought with the powers about the scripts, character development, and other things," he said. "It got so I was upset the minute I arrived for work. That's no way to live." After leaving the show, he told a newspaper, "The Bonanza situation was not the most fulfilling of my life. I needed to get into a different environment for a while, so I concentrated on regional theater." Though Bonanza made him a star, the fame never sat well with Roberts. He once compared his experience to Isaac Stern sitting in with Lawrence Welk. He didn't crave fame for its own sake, he craved meaningful work. The formulaic nature of Bonanza left him creatively boxed in. By 1963, he was questioning the premise of the show. "Isn't it a bit silly for 3 adult males to have to ask fathers' permission for everything they do?" The repetition wore him down. He admitted, "It wore me down." On set, Roberts did not hide his anger. He fought with producers and writers constantly. From the beginning, he challenged nearly everything. "For the first 3 years of the show, I fought all the way," he said. "Then I just became resigned to serving out my time." He hated the rushed production pace, with scripts arriving last minute and little time for rehearsal. "It was a lousy way to work," he said, and he made his dissatisfaction known. Producer David Dortort described him as rebellious, outspoken, and aloof, yet still acknowledged his talent. He could make any scene better. But by 1964, Roberts had stopped hoping things would improve. "I haven't grown at all since the series began," he said. "I have an impotent role. Wherever I turn, there's the father image." Despite all the on-set tension, Roberts didn't stay silent about issues beyond television. He used his fame to advocate for civil rights. In 1965, he marched from Selma to Montgomery alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., joining figures like Harry Belafonte and Joan Baez. On the Bonanza set, he also pushed against discriminatory casting. According to his family, he urged NBC to hire real Native American and Asian actors instead of white actors in makeup. He even suggested a storyline where Adam Cartwright would marry a Native American woman played by a black actress, which NBC immediately rejected. But Roberts didn't back down. He was committed to doing what he believed was right, even if it meant risking his career. In the middle of his TV career, Roberts also explored other creative avenues. In 1963, he released a folk music album through RCA Victor titled "Come All Ye Fair and Tender Ladies." The album featured traditional folk songs like "In the Pines" and "They Call the Wind Maria," showcasing a softer, more artistic side of Roberts. Music offered a sense of freedom that Bonanza never could, a way to express himself without interference. Though the album wasn't a commercial success, it was deeply meaningful to him. It was honest, raw, and representative of the kind of creative work he yearned to do. Meanwhile, his love for theater never faded. Yet his NBC contract restricted him from outside work during production months, a limitation that drove him crazy. He said one of the hardest parts of Bonanza was not being allowed to perform elsewhere. In 1963, he tried to break free by joining the stage production of Night of the Iguana, but the network was unhappy about it. By late 1964, Pernell Roberts was mentally and emotionally exhausted. Playing Adam Cartwright had pushed him to a breaking point. The role, once promising, had become so empty that he stopped reading scripts. He would show up on set, ask someone for his lines, deliver them, and go home. That was all it meant to him. One day, during filming, he was seen drawing thick. Pernell Roberts often crossed out black lines through his dialogue with a stubby pencil. He refused to memorize a speech, insisting his character would read it from notes instead. By this point, Roberts had reached a quiet rebellion. He later said he spent his final 2 years on Bonanza in a state of resignation. The character never changed or grew, and Roberts felt like a grown man stuck playing a child. Then came the moment that stunned Hollywood. NBC offered him one of the most generous TV contracts of the decade, $10,500 per episode, full rerun residuals, and a total payday of $693,000 for the 1965-66 season. But Roberts didn't even blink. He walked away. His co-stars stayed, got raises, and by 1970, they were millionaires. When asked about the money he gave up, Roberts shrugged. He said he didn't need that much to live. For him, art and integrity mattered more than money. Just weeks after filming his last Bonanza episode, Roberts stood shoulder to shoulder with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at the Selma to Montgomery March. He wasn't looking for attention. He had always been active in civil rights. He protested on picket lines, stood before lawmakers, and pressured NBC to stop casting white actors in ethnic roles. He even challenged the network over its all-white crews. For Roberts, standing up for justice mattered more than protecting a TV career. But behind the scenes, things had already soured. By 1964, his battles with the producers were open and bitter. He called the show childish, complained about its lack of diversity, and questioned why three grown men needed their father's permission for everything. His co-star Lorne Greene called him unprofessional. Producer David Dortort called him rebellious. Roberts fought back, crossing out dialogue and trying to insert honesty into a show he saw as silly and shallow. Years later, Dortort admitted he was wrong. He said he didn't appreciate just how good Roberts was, but by then it was too late. Roberts had already left. Convinced that television had become a machine for conformity and greed, Roberts felt it was killing creativity and didn't want to be a part of it. In 1972, he returned to Broadway, starring alongside Ingrid Bergman in Captain Brassbound's Conversion. It was a proud moment. A reviewer praised his performance and hoped it would finally lift the shadow of Bonanza from his career. It didn't, but it proved he had never lost his stage power. The next year, he played Rhett Butler in a stage version of Gone with the Wind. The show flopped. Critics blamed the production, not Roberts, but the damage was done. It was another miss in a string of post-Bonanza setbacks. His performances were strong, but the projects around him kept falling short. Hollywood used that to say he had made a terrible mistake by leaving. Still, not everyone agreed. In 1973, Roberts was nominated for a Joseph Jefferson Award for his performance in Welcome Home in Chicago. It was a rare moment of recognition during a rough time. He continued to do guest spots on shows like The Odd Couple, Gunsmoke, and Mannix, but the industry had mostly turned its back on him. He had become a quiet warning to others, don't rock the boat like Pernell did. 4 years, he couldn't get another series. He later admitted he never even had the chance to say no. After criticizing TV so openly, he was quietly blacklisted. Producers used him as a cautionary tale, do what we say, or end up like Roberts. He could have been bitter, but instead he healed. He returned to regional theater, far from Hollywood, and played everything from Captain Von Trapp in The Sound of Music to Randall McMurphy in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. These were lean years financially, but Roberts called them necessary. He said he had to regroup emotionally and never once said he regretted leaving Bonanza. In 1965, Roberts had walked away from one of the biggest shows in TV history, turning down $60,000 per episode, equivalent to over $500,000 today. For the next 14 years, he stayed mostly out of the spotlight. Few expected a comeback, until chance intervened. In October 1978, at a charity event, he joked about being television's most famous quitter. One of the producers, Frank Glicksman, was there. That joke turned into an audition, and the audition stunned executives. A year later, on September 23, 1979, exactly 20 years after his Bonanza debut, Trapper John, M.D. premiered. It drew over 28 million viewers on the first night. Pernell had returned in a big way. This time, he had script approval and more freedom over his schedule, something he never had on Bonanza. He wasn't just playing a doctor, he was shaping the show from the inside. In 1981, he was nominated for an Emmy, but almost turned it down. He disliked the idea of artists competing. He only agreed to attend after learning the episode being submitted, where his character operates on a political prisoner, was being used in medical schools. That episode reached nearly half the TV audience that night. Instead of launching an Emmy campaign, Roberts donated his $25,000 promotional budget to the Southern Poverty Law Center, including a note, use this to fight real battles instead of fictional ones. Trapper John, M.D. ran for 7 full seasons, outlasting his time on Bonanza with 151 episodes, ending on his own terms in 1986. Though Bonanza had more viewers in its heyday, Trapper John held strong even against tough competition. It was one of the rare shows with fans across age groups and backgrounds, making $127.8 million in advertising. Roberts himself earned around $4.5 million from his share of the profits. But for Roberts, it was never just about the money. He demanded his character be more than a stereotype. He asked writers to explore Trapper's past, especially his Vietnam War experience, and show how he grew from a reckless surgeon into a thoughtful leader, depth rarely seen in medical dramas then. Behind the scenes, he changed the rules. He picked his own team, which was unheard of. One of his boldest moves was hiring David Friedkin, a writer blacklisted during the Red Scare. That almost cost the show a major sponsor, but Roberts stood firm. He also pushed for diversity. Nearly 40% of the show's directors were women or minorities, 5 times the industry average. In 1981, he threatened to quit unless they cast a black recurring character. That's how Madge Sinclair got her role as Nurse Shoop. He treated the crew with deep respect, holding weekly meetings where anyone could suggest improvements. This boosted morale, lowered turnover, and saved time. He even created a profit-sharing system. 2% of syndication profits went to the crew. The Television Academy invited him to speak about it in 1984. Even at the height of his comeback, Roberts remained an activist. He gave away 25% of his salary to support free speech in the arts. He turned his private trailer into headquarters for equal rights amendment campaigns. Studio bosses didn't like it. He didn't care. When 7 TV stations refused to air his episodes due to his political views, he used his script control to create his boldest episode yet, Trapper treating wounded Nicaraguan civilians. He also launched a training program for underprivileged youth, bringing 14 young people to the set each year for paid production experience. Several later joined the Directors Guild. In his personal life, Roberts was quiet but complex. He was married 4 times. His first wife, a theater professor 15 years his senior, was the mother of his only child, Jonathan. His later marriages included one during a Bonanza lunch break, another lasting over 20 years, and a final, deep intellectual bond with Professor Eleanor Criswell. They married in 1997 and stayed together until his death. The hardest moment in his life came in 1989 when his son Jonathan died in a motorcycle accident at age 38. Roberts didn't speak publicly about it for years. He eventually admitted the grief was too deep to share. It changed him. After that, he chose roles more carefully and distanced himself further from the Hollywood spotlight. He lived in Malibu, away from the fame, in a home filled with books, Native American art, and ocean views, not awards. It became his sanctuary. When he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer at 79, he stayed there. No press releases, no seeking sympathy. Just privacy, dignity, and the love of Eleanor, who cared for him until the end. He died on January 24, 2010, at age 81. He was the last surviving member of the original Bonanza cast, outliving them all, even though he had left the show first. In a way, he outlasted everything: Hollywood trends, fame, and the roles people expected him to play.